Their codes were broken. Our trap was set. I stood on the flight deck of the USS Enterprise that morning of June 4th, 1942, watching our dauntless dive bombers warming up for launch, their engines roaring like angry lions preparing to strike. The Pacific Ocean stretched endlessly before us, painted gold by the rising sun, deceptively peaceful for what was about to become the graveyard of the Imperial Japanese Navy's proudest carriers. Somewhere out there, 200 meters northwest of Midway Island, Admiral Chuichi Nagumo's 4 carriers, Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, the same ships that had devastated Pearl Harbor just 6 months earlier, were steaming confidently toward their target, their decks loaded with aircraft, their crews preparing for what they believed would be another easy victory. What they didn't know was that we had been reading their messages for weeks, knew exactly where they would be, and were about to spring the most devastating ambush in naval history. My name was Norman Jack Dusty Cly, Lieutenant Junior Grade, and I was a dive bomber pilot with Scouting Squadron 6 aboard the Enterprise. Born in Coffeyville, Kansas in 1916, I had graduated from the Naval Academy in 1938. I had earned my wings in April 1941 and had been flying combat missions since the Marshall Islands raids. By June 1942, I thought I understood carrier warfare, but nothing had prepared me for what we were about to witness: the complete destruction of Japan's carrier force in minutes that would change the entire course of the Pacific War. The ready room aboard Enterprise was thick with cigarette smoke at 0400 hours on June 4th. Lieutenant Commander Clarence Wade McCluskey Jr., our air group commander, stood at the front with his pointer. McCluskey was a 1926 Naval Academy graduate who had taken command of the air group just 2 months earlier. "Gentlemen," McCluskey began, "the Japanese carrier force has been located approximately 200 meters northwest of Midway." He tapped the map. 4 carriers, Akagi, Admiral Nagumo's flagship, Kaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, accompanied by 2 battleships, 2 heavy cruisers, and 11 destroyers. These weren't just any carriers. These were the heart of the Kido-Bai, the mobile strike force. Akagi and Kaga were Pearl Harbor veterans, massive ships that could launch over 60 aircraft each. Soryu and Hiryu were newer, faster, equally deadly. Together, they carried 248 aircraft and the most experienced carrier pilots in the world. Commander Joseph Rochefort and his team at Station Hypo have been reading the Japanese naval code JN-25 for weeks. McCluskey continued, "We know their entire operation plan. They'll strike Midway at dawn, then wait for our carriers to respond so they can ambush us. What they don't realize is that we're already here." The intelligence officer explained Operation My Admiral Yamamoto's plan to capture Midway and destroy our carrier force. It was elaborate, perhaps too elaborate. Invasion forces from the southwest, a diversionary attack in the Aleutians, the carrier strike force from the northwest, and Yamamoto himself commanding from the battleship Yamato, 300 miles behind. "The Japanese will launch their Midway strike at 0430, he said. "Most of their fighters will be engaged. Their carriers will be recovering and rearming aircraft. Their most vulnerable moment. This is when we strike." Lieutenant Earl Gallagher, commanding Scouting Squadron 6, made careful notes. A Pearl Harbor veteran, Gallagher was meticulous. Beside him, Lieutenant Richard Best from Bombing Squadron 6 studied the weather. Wind southeast at 5 knots, scattered clouds at 1,500 feet, perfect diving conditions. I looked around at my squadron mates. Some were combat veterans, others facing their first battle. We all understood the stakes. The Japanese had better fighters. The Zero could outmaneuver anything we had. They had more experienced pilots, and we would be operating at extreme fuel range, 175 miles out and back, with minimal reserve. Torpedo 8 from Hornet will go in first, McCluskey added. The dive bombers follow. We launch at 0700. By 0600, the Enterprise flight deck was controlled chaos. Deck crews in colored jerseys performed their specialized tasks: red shirts loading bombs, purple shirts fueling aircraft, brown shirts checking mechanical systems. I walked toward my aircraft, SBD Bureau number 639. My rear gunner, John Snowden, was already checking his twin .30 caliber machine guns. Snowden was from Illinois, a quiet man who had saved my life before by spotting incoming Zeros. "Morning, Snowden," I said, climbing up. "Morning. Mr. Cly going to be hot today." I ran through my pre-flight inspection, control surfaces, bomb rack, fuel load. We had 230 grams in the main tank, plus two 58-gallons wing tanks. With careful management, about 4.5 hours of flight time. The SBD Dauntless wasn't the fastest, 255 miles per hour's top speed, but it was incredibly stable in a dive and tough as nails. It could absorb punishment that would destroy other aircraft. I strapped into the cockpit, surrounded by familiar instruments: altimeter, airspeed, fuel gauges, engine temperature, oil pressure. At 0645, pilot start engines came over the loudspeaker. I pressed the starter, and the right R1820 Cyclone roared to life. First to launch were the fighters, 20 F-4F Wildcats for combat air patrol. Next went the torpedo bombers, 14 TBD Devastators from Torpedo Squadron 6 under Lieutenant Commander Eugene Lindsay. I watched them lumber down the deck with their Mark 13 torpedoes barely clearing the deck edge. They looked vulnerable. Finally, our turn. Scouting 6 under Gala, with 18 planes, bombing 6 under Best, with 15 planes. I was number 2 in the 3rd Division. McCluskey would lead us all. The launch was always dangerous. Enterprise turned into wind, increased to 30 knots. The flight deck officer whirled his flag full power. The flag dropped. I released brakes and surged forward. The island flashed by. Deck edge approached. At 65 knots, I eased back and felt the wheels leave. For a moment, the heavily loaded bomber hung. Then the wings bit air, and we climbed. "Good takeoff, Mr. Clyus," Snowden said. "Thanks. Keep your eyes peeled." It took an hour for the strike force to form up. By 0806, we had 33 dive bombers from Enterprise, climbing to 19,000 feet. The planned rendezvous with Hornets Group never happened. McCluskey decided to proceed alone rather than waste fuel. We flew northwest at 19,000 feet in radio silence. I constantly checked instruments and bombs sight. At this altitude, I would have perhaps 10 seconds to line up and release. No second chance. At 0920, we reached the intercept point. Nothing. Empty ocean. My fuel gauge showed over half consumed. Quick calculation. Maybe 30 minutes to find them before turning back or ditching. Radio silence was oppressive. Everyone doing the same calculations. Then at 0955, McCluskey waggled his wings. Looking down, I saw a white wake, a lone destroyer racing northeast. McCluskey turned to follow, betting it was heading toward the main fleet. For 20 agonizing minutes, we followed that wake, fuel dropping toward empty. Then at 10:20, we saw them. The Japanese fleet appeared below like toys on blue carpet. 4 carriers in 2 groups, surrounded by escorts, aircraft on decks, white wakes showing maneuvering. Incredibly, no Zero fighters at our altitude. All down low, finishing off torpedo squadrons. "This is McCluskey, scouting 6. Take the left carrier, bombing 6, the right." But in confusion, both squadrons began diving on Kaga. I pushed forward and nosed into my dive. Acceleration was brutal, pressing me back. The altimeter unwound. 18,000, 15,000, 12, 0 feet. The carrier grew in my bomb sight. I could see aircraft on deck, crew running, anti-aircraft guns swiveling. Black flak puffs burst around us, but I held steady. At 10,000 feet, I saw individual planes on KGA's deck being refueled and rearmed. Hoses snaking, bombs on carts. Perfect timing, their most vulnerable moment. Gallagher released first. His bomb struck near Carr's Island. Fire erupted, bodies blown into air. At 2,500 feet, I pressed release and pulled back hard. 9 Gs crushed me into my seat, vision tunneling. The Dauntless groaned, wings flexing, then leveling out just above water, racing away. "Direct hit!" Snowden shouted. "Forward elevator, banking left." I saw my bomb had struck perfectly. Kerr's forward deck erupted in flames. Gallagher hit aft, others striking home. Within seconds, 4 direct hits, and Kaga was engulfed stem to stern. Simultaneously, Dick Best pulled out early. Realizing the error, he and 2 wingmen headed for Akagi. Best put his 1,000-pound bomb through Akagi's decammed ships. It penetrated to the hangar and exploded among armed aircraft. Akagi became an inferno. At exactly 10:22, Yorktown's dive bombers arrived and attacked Soryu, 3 1,000-pound bombs, within 30 seconds. The carrier exploded, a fire pillar reaching 1,000 feet. 3 carriers mortally wounded in minutes. Pulling away, the scene below was hellish. Kara was a floating volcano, explosions rippling through her. Her forward elevator, tons of steel, was blown completely off, spinning through air before crashing into ocean hundreds of yards away. Akagi burned bow to stern, deck buckling from heat. Tiny figures, crew, jumped into burning oil-covered water. Soryu listed heavily, hull ripped by explosions. She rolled over, hull glistening before slipping beneath waves. 20 minutes from operational to submarine tomb. Over 700 men down with her. But we missed Hiryu operating 10 miles north, hidden by rain squall. She was launching counterstrikes against our carriers. Zeros 3 high. Snowden's guns chattered. As 2 fighters dove on us, I pushed forward using our superior diving speed. Tracers whipped past. Snowden's guns went silent. Snowden, you okay? Hit, but okay. Got one. A Zero trailed smoke, spinning oceanward, but more coming. I stayed low, jinking constantly. Fuel gauge bouncing empty. The flight back was a nightmare. Fuel gauge showing empty, but usually a few gallons remained. Unusable fuel accessible if flying carefully. I leaned mixture until engine ran rough, risking fouled plugs for more minutes. Around me, Dauntlesses struggled, some trailing smoke, others running dry. Radio channels filled with desperate calls. Engine cutting out, going in. Ditching, mark position. Enterprise. Multiple aircraft emergency fuel. 2 Dauntlesses ahead, nose toward water. 1 pilot managed controlled ditching, he and gunner climbing onto wing before sinking. My engine sputtered, reserve tank last gallons minutes at most. Then, Enterprise appeared on horizon. Deck turned for recovery. Emergency fuel, request immediate landing. You're number 3. Number 3. Watching 2 ahead land, precious seconds each. Engine missing badly. As I entered pattern, engine quit. Dead stick approach. 1 chance. Altitude and speed just enough. Lowered gear. Extended flaps. Aimed for number 3 wire. LSO signaling cut. Too high. Pushed nose down. Trading altitude for speed. Propeller windmilling. Deck rushed up. Wheels hit. Bounced. Tail hook caught wire and slammed stop. Deck crew running before propeller stopped. Get us out. Wounded. They pulled Snowden from rear, hit in shoulder and leg, but conscious would survive. My plane had over 40 hits. How she held together, I'll never know. The ready room was somber, despite victory. Of 14 torpedo bombers from our Torpedo 6, only 4 returned. 10 crews gone. Hornets news worse. Torpedo 8, completely wiped out. 15 aircraft down. 29 of 30 men killed. Only George Gay survived, floating as he watched us dive. John Waldron had led them straight in. His last transmission, "We will go in. We won't turn back. Good luck." No torpedoes hit, but their sacrifice pulled Japanese fighters low, leaving carriers exposed. McCluskey entered, shoulder bandaged from 20mm shell. We got 3. Kaga Akagi Soryu finished. Hiryu, still operational, has hit Yorktown. Intelligence provided details. Yorktown hit by 3 bombs at noon. 2 torpedoes at 14:30. Listing badly, abandoned. But her sacrifice bought time to locate Hiryu. Japanese casualties approximately 2,500 so far. The officer said each carrier had 1,200 to 1,500 crew plus airmen, few rescued. Each number, a human being, someone's son, husband, father, died in fire and water thousands of miles from home for Empire's ambition. That afternoon, we launched again. 24 dive bombers found Hiryu at 1,700, put 4 bombs into her. She burned through night before scuttling. The Kido-bai ceased to exist. In following days, pursuing retreating Japanese, we sank cruiser Makuma. The strategic implications became clear. Japan lost 4 fleet carriers that took years to build, couldn't be quickly replaced. More importantly, over 3,000 trained sailors and airmen, including 100-plus veteran pilots with years of experience, understanding carrier operations in ways that couldn't be taught, irreplaceable. The Japanese Navy never recovered. Started war with 6 large carriers, now had 2. Would build new ones, but never again have trained pilots to make them effective. Institutional knowledge of best carrier divisions died that June 4th. For Americans, Midway proved intelligence could overcome numerical disadvantage. Rashfor's Coderiers gave us enemy's plan, allowing maximum advantage positioning. Without that, we'd have been reacting, arriving late, fighting their terms. Battle revealed critical Japanese weaknesses. Yamamoto's plan too complex. Forces scattered thousands of miles, unable to support each other. Radio silence prevented coordination when plan failed. They underestimated American capabilities, believing we'd react predictably. Nagumo faced impossible decisions. When scouts reported American ships at 0728, he was rearming for second Midway strike. Launch immediately or wait to properly arm. His hesitation, crucial 30 minutes, proved fatal. By launch, we were already diving. That night, Enterprise steaming southwest, I stood on deck under stars. Same stars over Pearl Harbor 6 months earlier, same witnessing 4 carriers' death that day. Adrenaline gone. Only exhaustion and emptiness remained. I thought about torpedo crews flying to certain death. Waldron's men knew their TBD devastators were obsolete death traps against Zeros. But they went, holding course while being shot to pieces. Their duty. George Gay watched friends die one by one, Waldron's plane exploding, devastators cartwheeling into ocean flames. Then 30 hours floating in shark waters, hiding under seat cushion from Japanese ships before PBY rescue. Survivor's guilt would last his lifetime. I thought about Japanese sailors I'd helped kill, diving on carriers. You see men on deck running, manning guns, pushing burning aircraft overside. Not faceless enemies. Young men like us fighting for their country. Some Kaga and Akagi pilots had flown since China 1937. Had families. Dreams ending in fire that June morning. Ocean littered with bodies. Destroyers rescued some, but thousands died. Burned by oil, shark attacks, drowning. War is never clean. Simple. Glorious. It's young men dying far from home. Historians call Midway the Pacific War's turning point. In one day, naval power balance shifted decisively. Japan went from carrier superiority to par. Then, as American shipyards accelerated to increasing inferiority, real victory was in combat power, equipment, training, experience, morale combination, making forces effective. Japan lost a generation of experienced pilots at Midway, and Guadalcanal's attrition. These couldn't be replaced. Japan's program producing perhaps 100 carrier pilots yearly couldn't match American programs soon producing thousands. Admiral Nimitz later said battle won by intelligence officers, breaking codes, damage control, getting Yorktown ready in 72 hours, when everyone said 3 months, and pilots pressing attacks against overwhelming odds. Each element crucial American victory, also industrial triumph. While fighting Midway, new Essex-class carriers under construction, ships dwarfing anything Japan could build. America would build 24 Essex-class. Japan struggled, completing 6 new carriers, mostly conversions, none equal to American ships. Japan started with 6 large carriers and world's best naval aviators. After Midway, 2 operational carriers, core pilots lost. Added new carriers, but never trained pilots to make effective, carefully crafted force, terrorizing Pacific, 6 months, effectively died at Midway. I survived the war flying 85 combat missions, credited with hitting 3 ships at Midway carriers, Kaga and Hiryu. Cruiser Makuma received Navy Cross. Retired as Captain 1962 after Korean service. Lived to 100, passing 2016 among last Midway dive bomber pilots. McCluskey recovered. Retired Rear Admiral 1956. Never sought recognition for following that destroyer. Decision-changing history. Son Phil said, "Quiet guy, not big talker." Died 1976. Pivotal role largely forgotten. George Gay became TWWII pilot post-war. Spent decades speaking about squadron's sacrifice. Wrote Sole Survivor. Appeared at Navy events. Died 1994. Ashes scattered where squadron went down, rejoining men he'd seen die 52 years earlier. Dick Best, who sunk Akagi with 1 perfect bomb, medically retired after Midway, breathed caustic soda from defective oxygen, permanently damaging lungs, never flew again. but lived until 2001. Often called Man Who Won Midway, Japanese carriers rest on Pacific bottom exceeding 17,000 feet depth. Recently located, Kaga found 2019 sitting upright, hull intact, but deck destroyed. Akagi nearby showing massive fire damage. War graves, tombs of thousands. Admiral Nagumo survived but never recovered. Relegated to shore commands. Then Saipan Defense committed suicide. July 1944. As Americans overran Island Chief of Staff. Kusaka survived, wrote extensively, accepting responsibility while defending Nagumo's impossible decisions. Captain Fuida, Pearl Harbor attack leader, aboard Akagi wounded, but survived both ankles broken by explosion but escaped. Post-war became Christian missionary promoting Japan-America reconciliation. Often said at Midway, Japan lost war in 5 minutes. Yamamoto killed April 1943 when P-38S using decoded messages shot down his plane over Bougainville. After Midway knew Japan couldn't win, reportedly telling staff, "I have killed many young men today." Midway Atoll designated National Memorial 2000 runway, where Marines faced impossible odds, now wildlife sanctuary where bombs fell, albatrosses nest peacefully. Norman Clyde's account reminds us that we weren't heroes, just young men doing necessary jobs. Real heroes were torpedo crews, knowing they'd die but going anyway. Codebreakers working secretly, mechanics keeping planes flying, damage control saving ships, corpsmen saving lives impossibly. Midway proved wars aren't won by best equipment, or most experienced warriors, won by those who adapt, seize opportunities, sustain losses, and continue. Most importantly, leaders understanding calculated risks necessary. Nimitz risked entire carrier force on potentially wrong intelligence. McCluskey risked fuel exhaustion, finding Japanese. Best risked everything, attacking different carrier with 2 wingmen. Waldron led squadron to death, knowing mission required it. Battle lasted 2 days, but changed everything. Before Midway, Japan, advancing everywhere, unstoppable. After never won another offensive battle, war continued 3 terrible years, costing hundreds of thousands more lives, but outcome decided those June 4th minutes, when dive bombers caught Japan's carriers with armed aircraft on deck. Consider alternate histories. If McCluskey turned back at empty intercept point, if Japanese launched 30 minutes earlier, if torpedoes worked, and torpedo 8 sunk carriers. Small decisions, chance moments, individual choices, determining nations' fates. But history deals in what was clear. June 1942. Morning, outnumbered American pilots in inferior aircraft caught world's most powerful carrier force at maximum vulnerability and destroyed it. Turned wars tied through intelligence, courage, sacrifice, and luck. Today's generation can't imagine democracy itself endangered. Freedom's survival questioned. We did. June 1942. Free world's fate rested on few hundred pilots from 3 carriers in mid-Pacific. We were enough. Against odds, logic, we were enough. That's Midway's lesson. Ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances can rise. Democracy produces warriors brave as any totalitarian system. Free men fighting for homes and families are Earth's most powerful force. The numbers: 357 Japanese died, 362 Americans, 4 Japanese carriers sunk, 1 American. But statistics: each number a human with hopes, dreams, fears, loved ones, each death tragedy. Young men who should have seen grandchildren died in fire and water. Pacific roles unchanged, unmarked by battle. Coordinates where carriers sank, just ocean patches. But we remember, must remember, long as free people exist, must remember Midway and its men. They saved the world in devastating minutes. 4 carriers, Imperial Navy's pride, reduced to burning hulks in breakfast's time. War's course, nation's fate, freedom's future, decided by dive bomber pilots pressing attacks against impossible odds. That's the legacy. Not just victory, but example. When tyranny threatens, free people rise. Courage isn't fear's absence, but action despite it. Sometimes world's fate rests on few brave individuals, and ordinary people do extraordinary things. Midway's dead. American and Japanese deserve remembrance, as humans who gave lives serving countries. American pilots, flying to death, protecting freedom. Japanese sailors, dying, saving burning ships. All brave men deserving better than dying young in Pacific's middle. But sacrifice wasn't vain. Freedom survived, flourished. Pacific, once battlefield, now peaceful, traveled by merchants, not warships. Japan and America, bitter enemies, now close allies. War seeming endless over 75 years. Soon none remain who can say I was there. Saw Kaga explode, watched Akagi burn, dove through flak to hit target. But story endures, must endure, because freedom valuing people need, knowing freedom isn't free. Purchased with blood of men climbing into obsolete torpedo planes, flying to death, diving through flak walls, hitting targets, giving everything, stopping tyranny. That's what Midway did. Stopped tyranny, saved freedom, changed history. In world-altering minutes on clear June 1942 morning, when world's fate balanced and American pilots tipped scales toward freedom,